So yes, I'd like to talk about digital transformation in the infrastructure industry. And what I'd like to do is keep it at quite a high level. So I won't get too techie, but the purpose really is to help us as an industry understand the direction of travel. And hopefully the relevance for this particular audience and this particular community is that we'll all need to somehow accommodate and include for digital transformation in current and future contracts. So, what I'd like to do is provide a bit of context at quite a high level, just to let us know what we are talking about and get some definition of terms out there. Also, I'd like to introduce the thinking behind the National Digital Twin and the concept of it. And then finally to get to the actual subject of this talk, which is to introduce the digital transformation landscape and just show how we all fit in to this really quite substantial journey. So let's start with that context. And you've probably seen graphs like this before. This comes from McKinsey. It shows a really quite woeful productivity gap between construction and manufacturing, which has opened up over a number of years and now means that construction is very well behind. Another thing from McKinsey is about the digitization of various different industries. And if you look for construction, it's down at the bottom in the red, near hunting and fishing, which is not a great place to be. And I think that these two pictorials are directly related. You know, part of the reason why we have this productivity gap is just because we haven't digitized yet. So that's one strand of context. Another maybe bigger strand of context is that we see an awful lot of big mega trends going on that affect the infrastructure industry. We're very familiar with those. I don't need to run through them, but they all seem to be really quite negative. However, potentially there's something going in the other direction, which we could call digital abundance. And what this is really an underlying economic fact that everything to do with data is reducing in cost at an incredible rate. So it doesn't matter what we're talking about, whether it's storing it, processing it, or transmitting it, the unit cost has dropped through the floor in an exponential kind of way, and it continues to drop. So what this really means is that we've moved from everything to do with digital being a scarce resource, and now it's an abundant resource. And whenever anything moves from scarcity to abundance, or from abundance to scarcity, you get some kind of revolution. And so what this means really is that digital transformation is just a fact. It's coming. We can't stop it. It is a mega trend, so we might as well get with it. So that's another key strand. Another strand I'd like to introduce is this concept of infrastructure maturity. And so we may well be familiar with different parts of the world at different points on this graph. And some parts are just emerging in terms of their infrastructure. Other parts of the world really going at building a whole load of stuff. But in the UK, we've been building our infrastructure and being quite serious about it for nearly 200 years now. We've been building it, we've been connecting it together. And so now we're at this place where 99.5% of the infrastructure we need, we've already built. And in each year, we add 0.5% to it. So we're really in quite a different place with regards to our infrastructure from people on that adoption curve in the growth phase. And I would suggest that that shift is something that means we need a mindset shift. Now, I would like to run through this in some detail, but time is probably going to constrain me. But what this is trying to do is indicate some of those mindset shifts that we need moving from the growth phase of infrastructure to the mature phase. And I'm not sure we've made this mindset shift. It does seem as if the way that we organize our industry is still in the growth phase, but actually our infrastructure de facto is in the mature phase, and we need to get with that program. The stuff on the right-hand side really supports digital transformation. So that means looking at whole life cost rather than just an initial cost. It means looking at asset management rather than just asset creation. It means looking at the system of systems that is infrastructure and seeing the things that we do as interventions on that system, rather than looking at infrastructure through the eyes of serial projects. it does mean that the kind of solutions that we're going to have to get much more familiar with are integrated digital physical solutions rather than just traditional constructed solutions. We might be familiar with the constructed solutions, but basically every solution we now provide will be some kind of combination of digital and physical. Sometimes a bit more physical, sometimes a bit more digital, but it will always be some kind of combination. And we're running out of greenfield sites, which means that we're always interfacing with that existing system. And what this kind of points towards is really the need for a different definition of value. So we don't just look at output per capex pound, but we see value in terms of outcome per whole life pound. And that's a very big mindset shift. So that, I think, is well, that's the last of the strands of context that I wanted to set. What I'd like to do now is talk about what we mean by digital transformation in the context of the big picture of infrastructure. And so that means seeing infrastructure as a system of systems. And then that means that we see our projects, really important projects, still 8% of GDP. Now, this is massively important, the delivery of new infrastructure. But what about the stuff we've already got? And so we can see those as interventions on the system. And so when we're talking about digital transformation, we're not just talking about the digital transformation of the delivery of new infrastructure. We're talking about the digital transformation of the whole thing. So it's not just the 99.5 or the 0.5, it's the 100%. We need digital transformation of the whole thing. So that's a really key point to get across. When I'm talking about digital transformation, it's not just digital delivery. Even though that's enormously important, I'm also talking about smart infrastructure. And if we look at infrastructure as a system of systems, then we can also see it as a system of services, because it's infrastructure that provides the services that deliver the beneficial outcomes that we're all aiming for. And it's really these societal benefits that drive us. And all the projects that we work on are really to make infrastructure better in order to deliver the better services, deliver the better societal benefits. And I think this is a really important point when it comes to understanding the connection between data and outcomes. Because if we don't see that connection, then just playing with data is kind of playing with a nice toy. So I wanted to get that out there, is the real importance of the ultimate outcome. That's what's driving this whole thing. And now this idea of a cyber-physical system, which might sound a little bit scary, but it's basically just applying Industry 4.0 thinking to infrastructure. Now, I think that we're very familiar, and actually in the UK, we're very good at the physical assets and physical systems. We've developed some serious world-leading skills on the physical side. We're just learning to appreciate the digital side of things and recognize that digital assets are assets and that they deserve to be managed properly. And this is part of the message of digital transformation, is to recognize the value of digital assets. They're real, they therefore need to be given real value, and we need to manage them properly. But the connection between digital and physical is really where the power comes. And that's the thinking behind Industry 4.0. It's the connection between digital and physical that really unlocks the value that drives the outcomes that we were talking about before. So that's what we're aiming for. It's the whole smart infrastructure thing. And then one final kind of bit of this high-level kind of concept stuff is around the information value chain and trying to indicate where the value actually comes from connecting digital and physical. And so I guess we're familiar with bits of this value chain. You can see data coming in from the bottom. We know what data is. We know that data can come from different sources, whether it's from kind of SCADA systems or from satellite data or from the Twitter fire hose. It's just data. We also know that the way it is at the moment in the industry is that we seem to keep our data in silos. And we block value by having data in silos, not letting it be interoperable, not getting the real value out of it. And also we know that our data at the moment is poor quality. And so data scientists tend to spend 80 or 90% of their time cleansing data and only 10% of their time doing something clever with it. So there's something important we have to do at the base of that triangle. But more important than just the data itself, because data is just data, is that we make something of value from it. And that means generating insights. And the way we generate insights is through the analysis, it's through modeling, but it means we can do something to data to get something that is of higher value. which is insight. And then we use those insights to drive decisions. And this eventually gets to my point on this diagram, which is it's those decisions, better decisions that are faster and cheaper, are where the value gets unlocked from using data. And then those better decisions lead to better interventions. The better interventions lead to better outcomes. And this therefore shows the connection all the way through from data to outcomes. It's the thing that takes us from insight to impact. And that is incredibly important because it means that we've now got a purpose for all this lovely data analysis. It's not just for the geeks to get on with. This is something that genuinely unlocks better outcomes per whole life pound through better decisions. And those better decisions could be design decisions, it could be operation decisions, maintenance decisions, investment decisions. It doesn't matter what. They all follow this same information value chain pattern. Are we okay with that? Nice to see a few nods. That'd be good. Thank you. Okay. So what this leads to, and I think it's remarkable actually that we're getting some really well-aligned government messages on this particular thing just now, all the way through from the industrial strategy, pointing out the importance of having an information management framework, the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Report, which importantly points towards the relevance of the existing infrastructure, not just the delivery of new, really supportive. And then the Data for the Public Good report, which came out about 18 months ago, which has these 3 high-level recommendations. At the highest level, it recommends that we move towards having a national digital twin, which for techie people is super exciting. I'll explain what that is later. But then in order to deliver the national digital twin, that we should have an information management framework for the built environment that would unlock secure data sharing and effective information management, and that we should bring together people from across academia, industry, and government who otherwise might have been working separately on this, bring them together to facilitate the framework, to facilitate the national digital twin. And so what I'm talking about here is beyond BIM. BIM is incredibly important. It's a really kind of it's a hugely important foundation for what I'm talking about here, because what it does is introduce the importance of information management. But we can go well beyond BIM, and that's what we'd be doing by moving towards the national digital twin, and I hope to explain that in just a second. So what on earth is a digital twin? And I guess quite a few of you are now hearing about this. There's a danger that it becomes one of those kind of techie bingo type of words. But fundamentally, it's a realistic digital representation of something physical. And the key thing that makes a digital twin a twin rather than just any other model is this two-way connection, data going one way and interventions going the other. And so what you can see in this diagram is kind of built into it, embedded in the digital twin, is the concept of the information value chain, going from data to insights to decisions to interventions to outcomes. And so it's an embodiment of that value chain and unlocking the value that we want. So digital twins have all sorts of benefits for improving decisions, but that's just an individual digital twin. What happens if you think about joining them? And so you could imagine in the context of, let's say, a water company, they might have a digital twin of a water treatment works because it makes sense in the operation of that. But why wouldn't that then be connected to the digital twin of the water network? Because the water flows from one to the other. And so you can see how making connections between twins makes sense in an individual organization. But if it makes sense with an individual organization, then maybe it makes sense across organizational boundaries, because there might be some data that should be shared between different water companies, or different water companies sharing the same water resource model. And so cross-company data sharing makes sense. And then also, if we extend it one level up again, this data sharing across sectors, because as I said earlier on, the system of systems of infrastructure is so interconnected, where you have the energy system interconnected with the water system, interconnected with telecoms, interconnected with transport. And so it kind of makes sense to have this digital twin enabling the connections. And so the definition of the national digital twin is not one massive twin of everything. The idea of it, rather, is it's an ecosystem of connected twins. And the connections are enabled by secure, resilient data sharing across organizational boundaries. If we can enable that, then we get the national digital twin. So it boils down to something quite simple. There's loads of benefits of the national digital twin, which again I'd love to go through, but I won't, not just now, unless you ask about it. The Digital Framework Task Group that I mentioned has been formed. The Treasury approved the recommendation of the National Infrastructure Commission last July, and so the Digital Framework Task Group has now been formed. There are 3 key bits of output that we've produced so far. The first one is the Gemini Principles that helps to establish the basic definitions of digital twin and national digital twin, but also establishes some values-based principles that we can take with us on the journey. We've also developed a roadmap which maps out the first 3 years of what could potentially be a 30-year journey. But nobody can plan 30 years, we can plan 3 years. So that's what the roadmap does, that enables us to get off the ground with this thing. And also we've established a digital twin hub, which is a collaborative learning community for those who are actually developing digital twins. And there are a number of major organizations which are already doing this. So bringing them together so they can share learning and help to grow standards, learning by doing. So that's what has been going on. When it comes to the landscape that is driving this, I've already mentioned the importance of that aligned government leadership on this, so I won't dig into the policy layer. But when it comes to the implementation layer, it seems that there are at least 3 really key layers. You know, those who are defining what needs to be done, those who can then ask for it from the supply chain, which is basically the client organizations, and then the supply chain, which, as we know, if it's asked the right thing, will line up and deliver the right thing, but it needs to be asked the right thing. So let me just dig very briefly into 2 parts of that, where the Centre for Digital Built Britain meets with the Infrastructure Client Group. And so this connection ends up being key, I think, for driving the change. On the right-hand side, you have the organizations that are associated with developing the framework and hopefully indicating what should be done. Hopefully you'll recognize quite a few of those acronyms. I can explain them later if you don't. On the left-hand side, we have the major infrastructure clients in the UK that are brought together around the Infrastructure Client Group, and they've formed something called the Digital Transformation Task Group, developing enterprise digital transformation strategies to drive digital transformation, both in the delivery of new assets, but also in the operation, maintenance, and use of existing. And so this connection is really important. On the right-hand side, what should be done? On the left-hand side, how to get it done. And if we look very briefly at those digital transformation strategies, a key part of it has to be about getting the basics right. You know, we've got further to go on BIM. We haven't got there yet. We need to push that further. But it's a great foundation for what comes next, which is what I've been talking about. CDBB call it operate and integrate. In shorthand, you could call it developing digital twins and then connecting digital twins. And so this is a key part of where we are looking to go. And as you can see from this, we're only just starting that journey. We've made some serious progress on BIM. We now need to follow it up with this progress on digital twins. And so simply put, that is Digital Built Britain. And you can see the operate and integrate down at the bottom there. And so what I'd really encourage is for your engagement on this agenda. It really needs your support and your alignment to make it a reality. And making it a reality will be a genuine benefit for the people of the UK and potentially Hong Kong too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.